Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the 7 Mile Chronicles podcast with your host, Kyle DeMello. On this episode, I stop in at a neighbor and good friend's house, Art Lavoie. Art has been hunting for quite a few years now, and he's been introducing his son into the bow hunting and rifle hunting world. Me and Art cover a lot of ground here, from early years of his hunting all the way to muzzleloader hunting in early December. Me and Art have shared a few good memories together. We also share a few great stories on this episode as well. Art and Leanna have done it right. They've raised little Jaziah into a great outdoorsman. And it's funny, a lot of times you don't get to see on a podcast the things that are happening in the background. At one point, I look over and Jaziah is moving a 36-inch TV from the room so he can go put it into another room. Very quiet, very well done. I really appreciate Art, Leanna, and Jaziah for giving me the time and opportunity to do this. So I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. And here we go. Thank you for meeting up with me and doing this for the podcast. I really appreciate it. We're going to get started right in off this. I'd like to know, how did you get started into hunting and when?
All right. I grew up like a average Maine kid, had a 22, would go through 500 rounds on a weekend killing red squirrels. But believe it or not, I wasn't a huge deer hunter growing up. So I have good news for all those dads out there that have kids that are growing up and you always hope that your kid's a hunter. Because, when I was in high school, I was not a big deer hunter. I was 17 when I shot my first deer. Had no idea how to get it out. Had to run home, get my dad. And my dad came out in the woods with me and helped me retrieve it and showed me how to gut out a deer.
Where did you grow up? Were you originally from around here?
Yeah, I grew up in Canton.
Canton, that's right. Your parents live over that way.
Yes, and actually what got me into hunting, believe it or not, is my wife now. When we started dating in, 1997, her dad was an avid hunter, huge bow hunter. And I started shooting bow with him. Oh my God, every weekend I'd go over during the day. It was like just shooting bow was great. We'd go and do 3D shoots. We'd shoot in the backyard.
So you didn't get into bow hunting till you met?
Yeah, I was in college.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I thought it was sooner than that.
No.
What's one of your favorite memories from early on, the early hunts, even if it's not even like a deer hunt?
Probably bow hunting because I love to shoot all the time. So I would go out with judo points, and my father-in-law and I would walk out in the woods, and we'd see an old stump, and we'd just say, all right, right here, and you'd have to guess the yardage and shoot the stump. And then we would transition into like red squirrels. Yeah. You see a red squirrel sitting there, and when I whacked my first red squirrel with a bow, I'm like, all right, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your first bow?
Well, believe it or not, it was a hand-me-down from my father-in-law. It was a high country, and it was an 80-pound bow. And he's like, oh, don't worry. This is an old bow. There's no way it's still 80 pounds. It was cranked all the way in. I shot all summer, and we went down to Lisbon, Top Flight Archery, or Fast Flight Archery. I don't believe it was there anymore. And he put it on the scales, and that bow still pulled 80 pounds.
No kidding.
A high country 80 pounds. And I bought my first, it was a Parker bow.
I've never heard of it. What was your first deer you shot with your bow?
So here's another weird one. Shot it in an alfalfa field. Thought it was a doe right at closing, just before closing. I could not recover it that night. Went home, got Leanna, her mom and dad. We went back the first thing next morning. We spread out. We did a grid search. We found it, 60, 70 yards. Didn't go all that far. It wasn't a doe. It was a not large, but let's say 130-pound buck, and it had really small antlers. 1-inch split antlers. So like a little dinky 4-pointer.
No kidding.
The biologist explained it that, doe can breed in 3 cycles. That was a late cycle deer. So born January, February, they usually always die. And he's like, that deer made it. That's why the body was big and the antlers were small. Kind of the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it's funny you say that. 3 cycles. I've never heard that, but I've wondered because feeding the deer during the wintertime, I had a doe this year that had spots on. In January, February, still had spots on.
Wow.
And this thing was 2.5, 3 feet off the ground. It was so small. I'm like, it won't make it. And it made it all the way to the last day I fed him.
That's great.
Kind of getting off topic of hunting, and there's a reason for that.
Yep.
How long have you been a forest ranger?
22 years.
22 years. This next question is from my brother, Cody.
Yep.
And The question is, do you feel that your relationship with the woods is different when you're doing your job as a forest ranger versus when you are hunting? And I'll give you an example of what Cody said as he hiked the Appalachian Trail. He says when he is hiking, he feels that he's part of the woods, and when he's hunting, he feels like he doesn't belong there. He said everything's running away from him. When he's in the woods hiking, he feels like everything is okay with him there.
Oh, that's interesting. So first, because probably a lot of people are going to hear that I'm a forest ranger, I'll explain that there's a difference between a forest ranger and a game warden.
Yeah.
So I am in the woods a ton, but a game warden obviously deals with fish and wildlife issues. I deal with natural resources enforcement. So really wildfire and timber are the two main reasons why I'm in the woods: water quality, air quality. So I don't know. I guess I feel like when I'm working and I'm in the woods, I'm always in a rush. So I'm always hustling. I'm walking logging jobs, just kind of going down skidder trails. But I guess I don't feel that way because, when I can slow down and take the time, especially in the wintertime, a lot of the deer move into where logging operations are to eat the tops. So sometimes when I see a lot of deer sign and it's, February, March, I do slow down. It's like, man, I hope I see some deer. So I guess at that point, I do feel like it's hunting to me, even though I'm out there working.
Right. And it's pretty neat that he mentioned that, and I can understand where he's getting at as you know, when you're walking through the woods with a rifle in hand, you do feel like everything wants to be away from you. It's the squirrels are letting you know from 250 yards away, they're squawking already, and you're like, what the heck? But then once for me, when I settle down and I sit in a tree stand or I'm sitting on a stump, and everything around you finally quiets down and it settles down, and then all of a sudden you hear blue jays squawking, and it's like they're doing the same thing that they just did to me that they're doing to a deer. They're just letting their own species know that, hey, there's something here. And I have had countless times where blue jays or a red squirrel will open up, and then within 10, 15 seconds, here comes a deer, and it's like, okay, that's when I really started learning to pay attention. Open, you got to do more than just look. It's all about listening too, and the animals can give away so much. And I think that was a cool question from him. Anyways, when did you start the food plot down in Minot? How long have you owned that piece of land?
I've owned it just 10 years. So, and I pretty much, the first year I took an old skidder intersection that kind of made a T out in the woods and went out there with the four-wheeler and hooked onto the small saplings and pulled stuff out with my four-wheeler. I had a small little walk-behind rototiller.
Yeah.
And I literally made 20 foot by 80 feet, and then kind of teed it at the top with a walk-behind rototiller and a four-wheeler out in the woods. And it's just slowly expanded over the years.
Now, did you pick that property due to the expanded zone?
I sure did.
Yeah.
I wanted something close to home in the expanded, and part of it was I'd spent a lot of time hunting I spent a lot of time hunting Auburn, and you get out of work, you take a few hours of vacation leave, you get down there, you sit for 2 or 3 hours in your tree stand, wait for prime time, and I got just disrupted by hunters so many times that I'm like, you know what, I'm going to buy my own piece of property.
Right.
And that way I have my own little piece of not being bothered.
So I have a coworker that he has been bow hunting for, I don't know, I would say over 25, 30 years. He just gave it up. And I asked him why. He said the last one that he shot, he wounded. And he's like, I've done it too many times where you just wound them and you have a hard time recovering them sometimes. And me getting started into bow hunting, is that something that is going to happen?
It happens. It happens to the best shooters that I know. But I think that's where you put in your time. That's where you're shooting June, July, August. You're shooting in the backyard. You're shooting 3D shoots. You shoot out of a tree stand. You practice. You shoot your broadheads before, the hunting season starts. And you get to know what you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable at 20 yards, then you shoot at 20. If you're comfortable at 30 yards, and that's what you take. One summer, I went with a bunch of friends, local friends. We went to Ohio, and we all would come to my house. I've got a bunch of 3D targets here that I bought from an archery place that was going out of business, and we would practice 2 or 3 nights a week. and shooting, and we were shooting 60, 70, 80 yards. I'm never going to shoot that at a deer. But when you feel comfortable shooting 60 yards at a 3D, man, it makes 30 yards feel like, dead.
So, like, it's funny, like, you're saying, like, you can tell me something like that's 30 yards and that's 20 yards. Like, I felt like I was good at it. Like, I felt like I could see a deer. I spend a lot of time in the woods. And so my first bow deer, I should say, it was a doe, is in a field. And it has got me pinned down and staring at me. I can't pull my rangefinder up. I had the crossbow, so I'm like, I got this pin. I got it. I mean, you're done. But I don't know what you're at. And you're in the middle of a field. And that's when I realized I can't judge distance in a field. And I swore up and down that deer is at 20, 25 yards.
And it was at 30 or 35?
It was closer to 35.
Yep.
And I released that thing. It hit low. And we recovered the deer. I think it was like 12 hours later. I made like rookie bow hunter mistakes where you go on YouTube, you like, don't make those mistakes. I made them. You have a bad shot on a deer. You know it's a bad shot. Don't go in after the deer. What's the first thing I did? I went in after it. It dropped a lot of blood. I mean, I think I might have sent you the pictures of the blood and asking you for some advice. I know I did a couple of guys that I know bow hunt. Like, it looked like good blood. And then once I recovered the deer, I realized that was a terrible shot. And I need to not shoot unless I know the distance, because I felt bad after that point. It's like that deer probably suffered for a while, and then finally it passed away. But next time, I'm not gonna make that mistake.
And fields for me are always the toughest. In the woods, it's way easier. All right, that's about 10 steps to that tree. Right. That's about 10 steps past that tree. That's how I'm always thinking of it. Like 10 steps for me is about 10 yards. Fields are tougher. Before I had a rangefinder, I'd go to my tree, set my tree stand down. I would walk out about 10 and kind of look at what I was standing in, and I'd walk out another 10 yards, kind of look at what I was standing at. Yeah. And, it might be a little flower or a clump of grass that's taller than other grass. So I would always walk out a little bit. All right, here's my 20. Then it's pretty easy to judge from there.
Right.
Now with a rangefinder, it is nice unless they're looking at you. As soon as I'm in my tree and quiet and settled in, I pull out my rangefinder and I range, even in a field. I'll pick a darker spot of grass and range it. All right, that's 18 yards. Okay, that dandelion out there, that's 30 yards. And so I'll range things so I know when they come to certain areas, boom, I've got my yardage.
One thing with that deer that I shot, I was backed up against a cornfield. So it was standing corn behind me. I had a green field in front of me, and these two big mature doe were coming into this field every night. And it's on a family piece of property. So I was like, I'm not in a rush to shoot them. I'm going to get a good opportunity to shoot them. And one of the doe came in the field with like an hour and a half left of legal shooting light. And I'm like, that's early. Like, that seems pretty early for October to be happening. So I was all excited. And then she was gone. I couldn't see her anymore. So I sat there for probably an hour. And what ended up happening was they actually got in the corn and started walking in the corn behind me. And I didn't know. I had no idea they were in the corn. And I had good wind blowing into the cornfield. That's why I sat with my back up on the ground level, with my back up against the cornfield, because if I was going to get in a tree, it was going to blow my scent across the field. And I said, I can't do that. The deer walked in the cornfield. They got almost behind me and something spooked them. Either it was me setting, because at the point where I was like, I got about 30 minutes left. I don't see very good when it gets dark.
Yep.
And I don't feel comfortable because I'm new at the bow hunting world. And so I'm like, I'm probably going to leave. So I slid my rangefinder into the pouch or my binoculars. I can't remember which one it was. And I kind of like made a noise. And then right after that, I have two deer blowing at me. And then they're standing right in front of me in the field. And it's like, I made the mistake. I shot low. Yep. And after the next day, I recovered a buddy of mine, and we kind of did a little anatomy thing. We looked at stuff, and it just, I got lucky, hit an artery and it eventually bled out is what happened. But I felt terrible, but I'll get better at it. I need to shoot more. Like you said,
yep.
Shoot more.
All muscle memory.
Yeah.
Same form, and then it just becomes automatic.
Yeah.
And I think there's something said too that, when I start in the early summer, I'll crank my bow back. Obviously, you start so you're good form and you're not pulling too much weight and you're not hurting yourself. And then, a month in, I'm giving it a couple cranks. I shoot for another week or two. I'm giving it a couple more cranks. So I'm at my highest poundage. that I'm comfortable with, can draw it sitting in a tree stand. So, I want a flat arrow. I don't want an arrow with a lot of trajectory, high to low.
What are you shooting now? What kind of bow?
So I was a Hoyt man forever, and my last 3 have all been Bowtechs. I'm a Bowtech guy.
Where's like your bow shop? Which one are you going to?
So I always used to go to Central Maine Archery in Auburn, and since they've closed, I really don't have one. But, Errol, New Hampshire, L.O. Cody's is awesome. It's a drive. I would probably go to Winthrop, Audette's.
I've bought 2 bows now from L.O. Cody. I've done a little bit with them. I feel like you walk in there and it's like they're so awesome. Like I haven't really done anything with Audette, so I can't bash on them or say nothing to them because I don't know anything with them. But how long's Jaziah been hunting with you?
So Jaziah just turned 14, off and on probably since he was 10.
Did you ever take him with you when he wasn't hunting at all?
Yeah, when he was little. Yeah, I'm not a huge blind guy. I've always, had my, I used a tree lounge for years and years and years, and now I'm a Summit guy because it's so much lighter. And so, yeah, I bought my first blind when he was probably 5. And I would go and pop up my blind so he could sit in it and bring a bunch of munchies for him. He was young, wasn't as into it and, a little loud, but I got him out there.
How long did he make it? Like when you were going out there, are you like expecting a
couple hours,
an hour, 2 hours?
Well, I would bring plenty of food and bring a few, things for him to do inside the blind that would conceal his movement. So yeah, he'd make it a couple hours.
Yeah. Now he's bow hunting now and rifle hunting.
His first deer came with a bow at 12 years old. And so I bought him a youth compound, like one of the 200 jobs down at Cabela's. It probably maxed out around 30 pounds. And he was shooting it pretty good. And he's like, Dad, I want to hunt. Dad, I want to hunt. Dad, I want to hunt. And I'm like, Bud, you just can't. It was a little diamond, which is actually made, I think they're owned by Bowtech. I was like, when you can shoot Mom's bow, so she has a Hoyt, a 40 to 50 pound bow. I can't remember the model now. It's not mine, so I didn't remember. I was like, when you can shoot Mom's bow, I'll bring you hunting. Yeah. So when he was 12, I cranked it down. It was at 50. I gave it a bunch of spins, brought it down somewhere. I assumed it was around 40, and he was hitting a pie plate at 20 yards, every shot. I'm like, all right, you're good to go. So, yeah, I went to mine it in the food plot, and it was funny. The first 2 hours, never looked at my phone. I was just sitting there looking, and he doesn't get to play a lot of electronics. So when I have my personal phone, I have my work phone, so I'll let him, install a few games on my phone when we're sitting because I'd rather have him sit for 4 or 5 hours with me. Right. So I'll let him play some games. So he's right into his games. So I looked for 2 hours, never saw a deer. Literally picked up my phone to look at my emails, and Jaziah's like, Dad, there's a deer. And I didn't believe him. Like, we're always playing little pranks on each other. So, like a rookie mistake, we're sitting in a blind. He's in front of me, I'm behind him. I kind of moved my head quickly to look out the window because I couldn't see out the window very well. And that quick movement, what do you think happens? Deer picks up on it. I'm like, oh, crap. Doe was a little over 20 yards, and it sees me move, and it's just looking right at us. And I'm like, don't move. And we're just sitting there. Seemed like a minute. It was probably 30 seconds. Finally, the deer kind of calms down, puts its head down, starts eating. So now I think he's in front of me a little bit to the left. I'm behind him to the right. The deer starts moving towards the right, so it goes into the corner of the blind. So I can't see it. I can't see it between the 2 windows. And Jaziah's like, Dad, it's putting its head down. It's eating, it's stopped, it's good, it's broadside. I'm like, all right, buddy, take a deep breath and draw back. And he drew back and he aimed and, he shoots, hear the whack. As soon as I heard the whack, I kind of look out the window real quick and I just catch a glimpse of the tail going into the woods. And he's like, Dad, the arrow's sticking out of it. What am I thinking? It went in 6 inches and didn't penetrate, because he's not shooting a lot of poundage. I'm like, oh, crap. So we sat there for a little bit, picked up our stuff, and I was like, all right, we'll just walk over to where you shot it, and then we'll walk out and put everything away, give it our good 20, 30 minutes before we go and look for this deer. We walk across the food plot, 23 yards is right what his shot was. And you can see where it jumped in the dirt. And about 5 feet in the edge of the woods, there's his arrow laying there, completely all shiny red blood. So the arrow went all the way through, and it caught up on the fletching on the far side.
Yeah.
So that's what he could see. He could see the arrow sticking out, and after 2 jumps, it fell right out of the deer.
Yeah.
Great blood. So, of course, we went and put everything away and came back, and he tracked it all himself. It didn't go 30, 35 yards, and there it was laying. Nice doe.
That's awesome. He got one in early season.
Yeah, first day of the season. So as a ranger, I get to go all over the country to fight wildfire. So this year, and I hate being out of Maine during that first week of Expanded. Like, that's your chance to get a nice buck in velvet, and I was in Idaho fighting fire the first week of Expanded, and I was lucky enough to have a buddy go and sit with my kiddo again. So he got his first one, a year ago on opening day, and this year he whacked another one.
And then he got one later on in the year.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that one.
So, of course, now he's got, leading into this year's rifle season, he had got 2 with his bow, and he hadn't ever gotten one with a rifle. And it was funny because he even said, he's like, Dad, maybe I'm just going to stick with bow hunting. Maybe rifle hunting isn't for me. And I'm like, no, it's good. And I shoot a Thompson Center Icon, the bolt action 308. And he's like, Dad, I want to shoot your 308. And he was shooting just a Savage 243 at the time. And I'm like, Bud, like, it kicks more. I don't want you to be afraid of it. I want to shoot it, Dad. I want to shoot it. And of course, I call it my good luck gun. And I'm like, this is a good luck gun, man. So I'm like, all right, I'll put a target out at the house. You 50 yards. Show me that you can pull it nice and easy and put it right in there, and I'll let you use it. And so he did, shot fine. So his very first day with my 308 sitting down and minded at the property, it's even more of a story. So real quickly, I have dogs, I have 4-wheelers. The only place I feel like I can keep my clothes scent free, I leave my hunting clothes and my boots in the back of my truck, like in the back seat,
right,
all season long. So I drive to mine it. I'm in, I might take my scent lock or my scent free shower. I wear jeans and a t-shirt and wear my sneakers to mine it. When I get there, I change into my camo in my big rubber camo hunting boots.
Yeah.
My kid is just grown inches and inches and now has a size 12 foot. So we're driving down. I'm already tagged out. I have my bow. I'm going to go bow hunt, and he's got my rifle. And I look over. He's got my camo boots on. And I'm like, are those my boots? And he's like, yeah, I put them on at home. I'm like, buddy, I'm in sneakers. I'm like, I always wear those boots when I'm bow hunting. So anyways, that was kind of the funny story is that I had sneakers on and he wore my boots, and we go down to the bog, and he ends up shooting a doe about 80 yards out in the bog.
With your rifle?
With the 308.
And your boots.
And my boots.
Yeah, okay.
So this is where it gets funny is it's really wet because there's some beaver in there now. So it's a really wet bog. So, for the first 20 feet, I'm trying to jump from hummock to where he shot that deer to see if I could find blood. Within 30 seconds, I'm soaking wet. I'm in sneakers in a wet bog. So that was the joke is I was wearing sneakers and, up to my knees in the water. But, yeah, so he got a one with his bow and then one with my rifle, which he says is his good luck rifle now.
That's awesome. What could you give for advice for someone like myself who's got a young kid who's 3 years old, right? And what's some of the best advice you give to help somebody get a little one started into hunting?
All right, this is absolutely the best advice. I really believe this. You and I love to deer hunt, right?
Right.
Deer hunt sitting. It's boring. You're putting in your time. It's colder. Don't stress about deer hunting. Get them out there with a pellet gun. Get them out there with a 22. Shoot squirrels. Go bird hunting. Of course, I have beagles, so rabbit hunting's kind of fast action. Do things where they can shoot 2 or 3 things every time they go out. You know? Shoot all the little stuff that's fun. And if you do that when they're 8, 9, 10, they're going to just want to deer hunt the older they get, But get them into that fast action stuff when they're younger. Don't get them into the slower, more boring stuff, and then they hate it and never want to do it as they get older.
I mean, I don't know how many years I've gone just sitting there and the whole season and you don't see a deer. I mean, I've been there
Yep.
for a whole month straight of not seeing a deer, and that can be very discouraging for a young kid.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
So we both kind of share a common hunting ground.
Yes.
And we've both had some pretty good success in that area. Why don't we both tell a story about some of our success back here? I'll go first, and I'll talk about my buck I shot in 2018.
Okay.
My wife was pregnant, and Wyatt was supposed to be due December 2nd was his due date or something like that. I think it was December 2nd. And I'm thinking, perfect. I get through the whole hunting season. I don't have to worry about anything. And November 7th or 8th, she wakes me up in the middle of the night and was like, something's not right. So she calls the hospital, and then before you know it, they're calling saying, come to the hospital now. And November 9th, here we have little Wyatt, right smack dab early rifle season, and I haven't even seen a deer yet. And now I'm starting back up at the mill. I'm like, I'm not going to get a chance to hunt. So I spent a week at the hospital. So I lost another week. Now we're into the middle of November. And my first day I get a chance to hunt, my father shoots a deer within, maybe an hour into the day. And it's like, there goes that day. The next day was a Sunday. I'm back to work Monday through Thursday. I was working 4/12 or something like that. And the next weekend I see nothing. That was the final day of rifle season. So I've gone the whole month. The only deer I've seen is a dead one. And I'm like, this is terrible. Muzzleloader comes and the temperature drops. And final day of muzzleloader season, I think it was -8 degrees that morning. And so I go over to my parents' house, and I'm sitting there, and I see 10 doe that morning. I don't even have a doe tag. And I'm like, ugh. I sat there all morning and froze. I get done. It was 11 o'clock. I go back to the house. I tell the wife, I said, I'm done. I'm calling it a year. So she's like, well, can we get out of the house? I've been cooped up for a month, with a newborn. And I'm like, yeah, all right. So we go out. We go to Walmart. We go to Pizza Hut for lunch, something like that. We come back. I'm staring out the back window, and she's like, just go out. You got an hour and 20 minutes left. Just go out back. And I hemmed and hawed. And, all right. Put my clothes on, to get everything, and I go up over the hill, my muzzleloader, and I don't think I was back there maybe 10 minutes, and I had a doe walk through, come up over the ridge and walk through, headed towards your place. But I still had probably another 45 minutes, and I waited, and it got down about 20 more minutes left to go, and I hear crunch, crunch, crunch in the snow, and I'm like, oh, here we go. What could it be, And I look, and all I see is tines everywhere. And it come up over the ridge, 40-yard broadside shot, open sights, muzzleloader, wind's blowing a little bit. I put it on it, boom, everything goes off like it's supposed to. The smoke comes up, and it kind of clears, and that deer's standing on its hind legs, and I smoked it, tipping right over backwards. Down it goes. I hear some thrashing, and then it kind of it gets back up and takes off. I'm like, what? I didn't move. I didn't call nobody. I didn't text nobody. I didn't move. I didn't even reload the muzzleloader. I knew I smoked it. I hear crunch, crunch, crunch. I look down. Here comes another one, another buck, and it steps right over the area that I shot that first one, and it keeps going right up over the ridge. I'm assuming that doe was hot. Still hot.
Yep.
That buck went through, and I start walking back. I'm walking along the top of the ridge, looking down over where that buck was, and there it is piled up. And that one was a nice 8-pointer. I think it went through the rot. 143 pounds, 144 pounds. Worst tasting deer I've ever had.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
It froze solid the first night.
Yep.
Completely solid. It was, that night, it was a low of -6. And it didn't get above freezing. It didn't get above 0 for 3 days after I shot that deer. And it wasn't until the following week, that following Friday, I started cutting it up. And I put it I put the heat to it in a garage for a whole day before I could even move its neck.
Yep.
And it just didn't drain any blood. It was awful. Grounded up almost all of it into Hamburg and shared a bunch with some coworkers. Kind of like, hey guys, sorry about this, but this is what we got. But that was a nice one. And what about yours? You got a couple of them, but I know you got a pretty nice one this year.
So the story of those two actually kind of lead into each other.
Yeah.
And it's funny from some of the things we've talked about earlier. 8 years ago, so I'd just lived here for a couple years. I had to work Thanksgiving. You had mentioned you'd had years where you don't see any deer.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen a set of antlers all year. And I'm not this big, great white hunter. I hunt a lot and I sit a lot, like
Right.
I feel like I put in a lot of hours every year. And, that year I did. I sat and sat and sat. And I don't know, maybe 20, 30 does, never saw antlers. I'm like, and I had to work Thanksgiving and the day after. Actually, I maybe had to work that last Saturday too. So anyways, so it's kind of a family tradition. On Thanksgiving, I always hunt with Leanna's dad. Everybody, my parents, Leanna's parents, family, always comes to our house on Thanksgiving. Leanna does all the cooking, and I had to work. So Leanna's like, well, I know my dad's going to want to hunt, so how about this? I'll get everything ready, and I'll have my dad come over, midday, and I'll go sit with my dad out back. I'm like, perfect. So, Leanna's dad and I have hunted over the years, so he knows where he wants to go and sit anyways.
Right.
And so, my wife is not a big hunter. Literally goes out maybe once a year, if that. But she wanted to do it really just to kind of do something with her dad. So, she had all the potatoes cut out of the squash, turkey ready to go in the oven, all that type of stuff. And I'm telling Leanna, all right, you're going to walk down this trail, go a few hundred yards, bear to the right. You'll see a nice, hemlock ridge. I want you to walk past the ridge. I'm trying to explain to her where to sit.
Right.
My wife has no sense of direction in the woods, right? So whatever I said, she did completely opposite. Now, still imagine I've hunted all season, haven't seen antlers. She sits one day.
I know where this is going.
Yep. She goes, sits on a stump. We call it the lucky stump now. And it's nowhere remotely close to where I told her. She sits for a couple hours, and she's just thinking of, I need to get back and get everything set to cook. My dad said at closing time, or, just before closing time, he would walk to me and for me to sit until he walks to me, and then we'd walk home. And Leanna hears crunch, 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 and she's looking for her dad. She's like, oh, good, finally, here he comes. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Where is he? She's looking for orange. She's looking for glazed orange. Where is he? I can't see him. Crunch, crunch, crunch. She looks over. She says 20 yards on the ridge right next to her is this gorgeous, beautiful 8-point buck looking right at her.
Right at her,
and she's like, I'm moving all over, like looking for my dad. And, of course, her eyes bulge out of her head. The buck's eyes bulge out of her head. And the thing bolts. She doesn't even get a shot off. So that weekend, I think it was Sunday, I was off maybe Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I work a rotating schedule at work because we have fires on weekends, obviously. So I have to work weekends and weekdays. And
They don't pick during the week?
I know, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So Sunday, I have Leanna walk me out to where she sees this buck. So this is the Sunday before muzzleloader. And she shows me where she is. And you know me, like, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this isn't even remotely close to where I told you to sit. Why would you even go this way?
Yeah.
So Monday morning comes. I'm off. I'm sick as a dog. Sick. I'm like, oh, crap. I didn't even buy my muzzleloader license. I was so bummed. And it had been a long season. I hadn't even seen antlers. My wife sits for 2 hours and sees a gorgeous 8-pointer that she doesn't even get a shot off. I was, had a rough year, right? I have a local buddy who might be a UPS driver. He calls me probably 2 o'clock Monday. You hunting? No, I'm sick. I feel like crap. I'm not going. Oh, come on, Lavoie. You hunt every day. Like you're not going. I'm not. I don't feel good. I get off the phone, and I'm like, what do? I flip open the laptop.
Yeah.
I buy my muzzleloader license. I load my muzzleloader, and out I go, feeling like crap. And actually, I kind of got out a little late. It's probably 3:30. Where do I go? I go to where Leanna sat and saw that buck on Leanna's stump. And I'm there 20 minutes and coming down off the ridge, here come 2 does. And they come walking down, wind's in my face, which is good. And they come walking down beside me, and they get closer and closer. They probably got within 25, 30 yards. Of course, they know, all right, they get that close, they realize something's wrong.
Something's different, yeah.
And I just happen to look back up in the woods. They had logged recently, so you could see pretty well in spots. And
Yeah.
like you said, here come the tines, right? Here come the big white antlers. I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So the does freaked out a tad, but they never blew. They didn't flag. And finally, they just sort of skirted by me. They still knew something was wrong. And he just came following right down in their footprints, and I whacked him.
Nice.
So fast forward, I hunt a lot in Minot. It's like my own land. I love being in Minot. So this year, so out throughout the last 8 years.
Are you getting into this year's deer?
Yes.
Well, before we
Sure.
get there, I do want to share a little story of a pretty funny story actually. If anybody that's muzzleloaded, they've been through the pain. 2019, I didn't get a deer in 2019. I didn't tag out, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you tagged out either. I don't believe
With a bow.
you tagged out with a bow.
Yeah.
But you didn't must down a mine.
Yeah, expanded.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now you were muzzleloader hunting.
Yes.
And do you remember this?
Yes.
So we're texting each other, and you're like, "Hey, push the piece," and I'm like, "All right, here I come. Hang on." I mean, that morning we had seen a bunch of deer.
Yep.
And we knew they were between us, so I start pushing the piece. I'm seeing tails running, and I'm headed right towards you. I'm like, I probably should get ready to get tucked behind some trees. Like, things are about to go down, and I know I'm getting close. Then all of a sudden I hear, pew, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. And if you've muzzleloader hunting, you know, like, that's the worst sound in the world, or the sound where you just hear click and nothing goes
Yes.
off. Like, and of course they ran off different directions. I believe they crossed over the road, right?
Yeah. Yep. They did. Yep.
Yeah. So go into the one for this year.
So I have sat on that stump quite a few times over the years when I'm just kind of staying. I hunt a lot on my land. I just love being down there, love walking around there. But every once in a while, I need a change. I'll sit on Leanna's lucky stump, and I've never shot a deer since that 8 years ago there. And so this year, I kind of hunt the other side of the property more, and I hadn't been over to that stump. Sat out back in the morning, saw a couple does, and I went to mine it. And I'm kind of battling a little bit of a shoulder issue from too much pickleball, so I hadn't put my big tree stands up. And they're a little scary. I actually used 30 feet of climbing sticks to get up high because the bog's really thick, and I have to get above the alders to be able to see anything.
Yeah.
So I had a friend with me. I'm like, hey, I need to put up a couple tree stands, but they're a little hairy. You want to just be there as I'm sticking them up? Yep. So we go down, and so when I'm in mine it, of course, that's also rifle zone. I'll bring my bow for expanded. My bow's on one shoulder, and my rifle's on the other shoulder as I go to my tree stand.
Right.
And so we went down there, put up the tree stands. It was hot, and I got all sweaty, and I hadn't really eaten a lot. And I'm like, let's go in town and grab some snacks, which we did. I'm like, you know what? It's like, let's go home. I'm like, I'm sweaty. I knew where I said, I know I said we'd bow hunt and we'd stay down here, but let's go back to the house so I can change. So we just changed our plans, came back here.
Yeah.
I hadn't been over to that stump or in that area at all. So I ended up going to that lucky stump this year.
Oh, no kidding.
And same deal, sitting there. It's grown in quite a bit now, especially like, the sprouts off from the stumps. Can't see as well. And I'm sitting there, I don't know, must have been another half an hour before closing. And I hear something moving, and here comes a doe, almost down exactly like it was 8 years ago. And I can hear grunting, mer, mer, mer. And I actually thought it was another hunter for a second, saw that doe and was trying to call it back because there is a lot of hunting pressure out back.
There is.
But it keeps going, mer, 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 mer. And I'm like, there's no way that's a hunter. And this deer turns, so there's a bunch of little ridges, turns, and it comes right up onto my ridge. I'm sitting on the stump, no cover, but, I'm kind of thinking, well, it's rifle, right? You can see 100 yards here, there, and everywhere. You're going to shoot before they ever get close. Well, no, this doe comes right onto my ridge, and it's a little bit of a natural trail or, a little bit of a run there on the ridge, and she looks right at me, 20 yards away, knows that I don't belong. And I'm just kind of looking out of the corner of my eye, and all I see is antlers. I can't see its body. I can't see its neck. I can see one antler kind of sticking out of the bushes. And she stops because she knows I'm there, and he stops. And I'm like, oh, shit, this is not good. I can feel a slight breeze in my face, so that makes me happy. Gun's already up on my knee. You know, I got my left hand on the forestock, and my right hand's already, you know, sitting on the safety and on the rear stock.
Right.
And she starts doing the head bobs. And I'm like not moving. I don't dare even blink. And she's taking a step towards me. Head bob, picking up a foot, like wants to do a little stomp and takes another step towards me. And I'm like, oh my God. And the buck's not moving.
How close is she?
Oh, at now she's a little under 20 yards.
Yeah.
You know, 18 yards, let's say. And there's not a single tree, not a whip between her and I. I mean, I'm sitting on top of the ridge and she's on top of the ridge. And he knows something's wrong because the missus is acting funny, right?
Right.
He's not moving. I'm like, oh my word. And, you know, I can see that antler. I can see an ear, see a nose a little bit. It felt like forever. I mean, it felt like 5, 6, 7 minutes. It was probably 2. You know, your heart's pounding. I can't move because I know the second I move, she's going to blow and take off.
It's almost like you don't even want to breathe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is the first time it's ever happened to me. I got really like, you know, my eyesight really sucked in. They say it happens a lot in law enforcement and like really stressful situations where you completely lose your peripheral vision and you're just focused straight ahead. It has to do with like blood flow and your fight or flight reactions.
And everything around you.
Yes.
It blends right in with each other.
It just fogged right in. And I would slowly blink and I could focus again. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I can see. She finally just walks, or, you know, with intention, she walks off the other side of the ridge to get away from me. And I'm sitting there. So now at least she's not looking at me. And it was like, it was do or die. I was afraid of him turning and I would never see that buck. He's gone, right? And so I've got the gun. I pull it up to my shoulder as I just lean as far to the right as I can. And he's looking right at me. I've got 2 antlers, a face, and 10 inches of neck. And I just put my crosshairs on his neck. And he's only 30 yards from ridge to ridge.
Right.
So, you know, it's close. I mean, crosshairs are right on his neck. Pow! I shoot. He's actually angled towards me. I just can't really tell because he's in the bushes. He takes one jump. Now he comes out of the little thicket and, you know, now he's 25. There's not a tree between us. I'm racking in a second shell with my bolt.
Now you're getting a full good look at him and realize,
you know,
this is nice looking deer.
Nice deer.
Yeah.
And, you know, put the crosshairs right in the middle of the rib cage and give him that second shot, which was the one that did him in.
Right. Then I got together with you, I think was it a week later we got together when you did the European mount on it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then, which was pretty neat for me because I really hadn't been a part of it. I've seen people do it, I've watched it on YouTube, but it was kind of neat to see how you've done it because you've done quite a few of them. You have quite a few of them, so it was kind of neat to watch that, and I got to learn how to do that, and I definitely am going to give it a try on my next one. So
yeah.
What's your plan for the food plot this year?
I just want to make it good so my kids get a chance.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. You guys were down in Boston or New York? Where were you guys?
Yeah, we were down in Boston.
Boston, yeah. So, and then with Jaziah doing tennis now and everything, you guys have been pretty busy. So I really appreciate you taking the time and doing this with me.
No problem.
I hope to have some more good memories with you during hunting season coming up, and good luck to you and Jaziah both on this upcoming hunting season.
Thanks, you too, buddy.
Take your time when you don't jerk the trigger. Yes! Nice job, buddy.